Hi, I'm Luca Dell'Anna, and today I will talk on how to make meetings and especially team meetings more effective. If you ask managers around the world what's the #1 sign of an ineffective meeting, they will say it's an unclear agenda. But I disagree. That's the problem for the managers and for their evaluation of what's an effective meeting. But if you ask to the attendees of the team meetings what's their #1 pain point, I assure you that they will say something along the lines of irrelevance, or it's a waste of time, it's unhelpful, and so on. And the #1 problem and solution for making meetings more effective is to make them more relevant, more concise, and more effective. And today, across this mini guide, I will give you many tips and practical ways on how to make your meetings more concise, relevant, effective, and helpful. But first, one key bottleneck is your ability and the ability to the attendees of the attendees to the meetings to speak concisely, relevantly, concretely, and effectively. Because even if you have the perfect agenda for your meeting, and even if your skills in running the meeting are excellent, if all the attendees lack the ability to speak concretely, and every time they take the word, maybe for a progress update, and they speak too long, they're too boring, they cannot get to the point, they add a lot of unnecessary details and noise, that it won't matter how good your agenda was, it won't matter how good your facilitation skills are, the meeting will be boring and irrelevant. And when someone speaks, people will just doze off or get distracted. And because they get distracted, they don't get the point of what the person wanted to convey, and therefore they won't know how to follow up properly. And if you ask, for example, for a progress update to someone and they're not able to clearly say what the bottlenecks are for the project, then the progress update will be ineffective. So, to summarize, the #1 bottleneck in my experience for effective meetings is the communication abilities of the participants of the meetings, including you, the manager, of course. And therefore, one of the main solutions to make the meetings more effective, engaging, it's to work on the communication skills of its participants. It's to teach them on how to be more concrete, more concise, on what constitutes, for example, a good progress update, on what constitutes a good suggestion for if you go around asking for suggestions, and so on. However, how do you teach effectively your people to communicate more concisely and concretely? The #1 answer usually it's a training session, but I really do not like this answer. That's training sessions, they work well for compliance matters, when you have to teach a procedure which is made of steps, and if you make the steps, you guarantee a result. And that's just not true for communication. When you teach people how to communicate well, concisely, and concretely, that's not about following a list of steps. And therefore, that's not something that you can teach effectively in a training. And by the way, if you are dealing with people, some employees maybe which are very strong on the technical side and they don't see themselves as a communicator, and you tell them that you're going to put them through communication skills training, they will probably react with defensiveness, or they will disengage, they will think, that's not for me, and so on, and the training will be ineffective. Instead, what I've seen of being very effective in teaching communication skills to your team is small pieces of feedback and coaching them. So what do I mean by coaching? I mean that you talk to them one-on-ones, maybe after the meeting, and you are very concrete on telling them small areas of improvement, how to improve those areas, only one at a time, and you coach them on how to improve. You make them do small exercises, and you give feedback on that. So let me go with a very concrete example of what I would do, for example, if I were a manager, and during one of my meetings, I see that there is one participant which is making, for example, a progress update, but it's taking 5 minutes to make the progress update. He's adding a lot of unnecessary details. He mumbles a lot. He doesn't really know what he wants to say. And as a result, everyone else in the room just disconnects, doesn't loses engagement, starts thinking about something else, and so on. So when you notice that you have one person that has this communication problem during your meetings, you want to talk to them after the meeting, maybe immediately after the meeting, maybe later that afternoon, maybe the following day, but don't let too much time pass by, and you want to talk to them one-on-one. And you want to start the conversation not with, for example, hi Mark, we need to make a communication skills training, because if you start like that, you will put them on the defensive mode. Instead, you want just to refer back to a very specific example. So you want to refer back to the meeting that just passed. And you want to be very specific and concrete. So for example, you want to say, hi Mark, thank you very much for your progress update last meeting. It was very detailed and it helped us understand the status of the project and plan for it. However, then you want to talk to them about the problem. Lead with the problem. And the problem, I mean the concrete consequence. So you want to say, however, Mark, I've noticed that you took more than 5 minutes to talk about the progress update, and you added a lot of small details. And I've noticed that that caused a lot of people in the meeting room to disconnect, to lose engagement. And of course, it's on them to stay engaged during the meeting, but it's also true that if you could make your future progress update a bit more concise, maybe you talk just about the priority points, you don't add too many details, that would also help people to be more engaged, and therefore will make your already valuable contributions more actionable and more listened to. So you see what I'm doing here? I'm leading with the problem that no matter how valuable his contribution, if they are not listened to, they're not really creating impact, they're not so valid after all. And then I'm showing that I understand that the problem is not just on him, it's both on him to being concise and on everyone else to listen, even if the speaker is not concise. But then I'm saying that, yes, part of the responsibility is on them, but part of the responsibility is also on you. And doesn't matter that part of the responsibility is on someone else, you should still do what you can to improve and to make it easier for others. So I'm telling to Mark that he should speak more concretely and more concisely during future meetings. However, if I stop here, as many managers will do, they will just give the feedback, you should be more concise. What happens? The answer is probably nothing will happen. Because if Mark, in this case, already knew how to be more concise, of course he would already speak more concisely. Moreover, conciseness always has a trade-off. The more you are concise, often the fewer details you put. And a lot of people are not concise because they think that they need to add all details. They think that everything is necessary. And that's the limiting belief that they have. So if you just stop the conversation here, asking Mark to be more concise, what happens probably is that he will nod. He will say, yes, I will be more concise, but then in practice, he will not do it. And maybe he doesn't do it because he doesn't know how to do it, or maybe he doesn't do it because he thinks that all the details are necessary. Either way, he will not be more concise, and that's not what you want. So when you give feedback to Mark, when you coach him, you want to be effective. And being effective means removing limiting factors. So that means you should ask Mark, so will you be more concise during the next meeting? Or do you feel ready to be more concise during the next meeting? Something along those lines. And then maybe Mark will say yes, or maybe he will say, I don't feel ready, I don't really know how to speak concisely, I'm not a good communicator, and then you should teach him how to speak more concisely. Or maybe he will say something along the lines of, yeah, I understand they need to be concise, but I also think that details are very important. And in this case, it's your job right now to address this limiting belief. For example, you want to tell him that, yes, the details might be important, but if you add too many details, especially before going to the point, people will not listen to you. And that means that no matter how many details you put, they will not reach the listener. And for example, you want to tell them something along the lines. So first, it's important that you reach your point concisely, and then you might add some details, but only later. Or if people need details, they will ask you for questions. They will ask you with a question. So this is what you want to say if he has limiting beliefs. If instead he doesn't know how to be more concise, you might need to give him some tips on how to be more concise. For example, what I advise some of my clients is to take, I just ask them a simple question. I ask them, what's the point that you wanted to make by communicating the progress update? And then maybe they say, oh, I just wanted to clarify that there is a risk of delays because we don't have enough personnel, for example. Okay, then you, if Mark replies that, you want to tell him, great, that's what you should have started the progress update with. Even that could have been just the core of the progress update, and then you could have asked for questions, or we could have explored some solutions to solve it. So this is the first thing I will do if the problem is that my colleague doesn't know how to be more concise. I will just refer to a specific example, for example, last meeting, and I would ask him, what did you want? What is the point that you wanted to make? So in this case, I would say, Mark, what was the point that you wanted to make with last week's progress update? If this doesn't work, then I would ask the person I'm working with to take a sheet of paper and to write 2 or 3 bullet points with the most important points that they wanted to pass. And then I would instruct them that the 3 bullet point is what the progress update should have been. Not a 5-minute discussion around those bullet points, expanding them with details, just the 3 bullet points. And then once you verify that everyone understood those bullet points, maybe they ask questions, and that's your chance to provide some details, eventually you might add some details, but you will see over time that it's probably not necessary. So this is what I would advise people which have trouble with speaking more concisely to do, is before the meeting, you take the sheet of paper, you write 2 or 3 bullet points of what you really want to say, and then you just say the bullet point, trying to, you just read those 3 bullet points, trying to resist the temptation to add more detail. Okay, so go back to our hypothetical conversation with Mark. So just to recap, you validated his contribution. So you said, thank you, Mark, for the intervention for the progress update you made last week. That was really, then you want to be specific to make sure that he feels like you really listened to his presentation. So you want to say, thank you for making the progress update. I really liked that you highlighted the bottleneck that could cause a delay. So that's specific, you make him feel listened to. So this was the first point, acknowledge the contribution. Second point, lead with the problem. You want to say, the presentation, your progress update took too long, and that caused some people to disconnect, for example. Third point, you want to tell them that they should be more concise and concrete. Fourth point, you want to ask them whether they feel ready to do that, whether they can commit on being more clear during the next weekly meeting, or maybe they cannot for any reason. You want to surface those reasons. If the reason why they cannot commit is because they don't know how to be more concise, they don't feel ready to be more concise, they don't feel able to be more concise, then you want to explain them how. For example, you can tell them, you can ask them what's the main point, you can ask them to write the 2 or 3 main points as bullet points on a sheet of paper, and then just say that. And if instead the reason why they don't feel ready to be more concise is a limiting belief, then you want to eradicate this limiting belief. You want to address it. You want to explain why, yes, it's a valid concern, but still they should be more concise, and you want to explain the why. You don't want to just say that, you want to explain why. Because if people don't listen to you, then no matter how good is the information you provide, it will not reach the recipient, and it's as if you didn't provide that information. Okay, so we almost concluded the conversation, but we cannot conclude it yet. Because sometimes people will just say, yes, now I understood, and maybe genuinely they think that they understood it. But then next meeting, when they try to be more concise, they will maybe have too much fear, they will be paralyzed, they will realize that they thought they knew how to be more concise, but they're not really able to, or maybe they think that they are not able to. Either way, it will be a mess, it will be very awkward. So before you conclude the conversation with Mark, you want to let him practice. So you can ask him, so Mark, can you put that in practice? Can you try just to repeat the progress update you made last week, this time in a much shorter amount of time? And you ask him to do it right now, and he does it. And if he succeeds, great. You validate his progress. You make him understand that even if he added less details, because he was more concise and concrete, he managed to engage the audience more, and that means that the audience understood and retained more out of it. You want to tell him. And if instead he's not yet concrete enough, if he made some progress, you want to validate the progress, saying that's enough as a first step, and maybe in a few weeks you will go back to him. And if instead he really made no progress at all, then you want to spend 5-10 more minutes still working with him, trying to reach at least some step forward. So I know that coaching this way, so it's not just a training session, it's not just feedback where you're telling him about the problem and an area of improvement, it's not just a training session where you're telling him how to improve, but it's coaching. You're doing all of the above, and you're making him doing exercises, and you give feedback on the exercises that he does, the practice that he does. You probe for limiting beliefs, you address those limiting beliefs, you ask for commitment. That's all you need to do while coaching your people. And I know that coaching takes a bit more time than training and feedback. And I know that you're a very busy person. But if you spend 10-15 minutes with each of your employees and you coach them to speaking more concisely and concretely, you will save so much more time down the road. Because the next time that you're speaking with them, the conversation will not take half an hour, it will take 10 minutes. And it will be much more effective, and it will remove the need to have further conversations, for example. So this is my big takeaway for now. The communication skills of your people are one of the main drawbacks to meeting effectiveness and in general to team effectiveness. And it's your job as a manager to improve the communication skills of your team. And the way you do it is not through a generic training, but it's on coaching them and coaching them about the very specific types of communication that they need to do in their daily job. Thank you very much. In the rest of this guide, you will see more examples. I will even have some exercises for you, some quizzes, and I will take it very, very concrete so that you will not just have an abstract idea of what you need to do to get your meetings more effective, but you will also know how to do it. And I will also tell you about some best practices. I will tell you how some of the most effective meetings that I've witnessed were run, and so much more in this guide. And I will also have more videos. And thank you, and please keep reading this guide, put it in practice, and reap the benefits of more effective team meetings. Thank you.